Bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down here. It is a Tuesday. It is May 26. It is Der Klassiker. It is a huge match today in Germany, the match of the season in Germany, in the weirdest of environments without fans for this one. Dortmund in a maybe not must win, but must not lose situation. Draw would keep their hopes alive. A win is critical if they want to win the title. They're facing Bayern Munich today. That's at 12:30, and it's going to be on FS1. We'll get you set with all the details for that one. The rest of the English week schedule. If you haven't heard in Germany, this is a term, and I'm not good with my German, so I'm not even going to try. But a midweek match week is called an English week. And I think it's just down to this idea that the English work very hard. So you have a second game during the week, and it's called an English week. If there's a better story for it, please tell me. But I think that's what I have always heard, is that they've always felt like the German game or the English game, the English players, managers all work very hard. So when you have to work double, it's an English week. So that's what this is known as, a ghost game during the English week. There's all kinds of terminology in Germany that we're starting to learn from our newfound love of the Bundesliga. We'll talk about the Premier League. We'll talk about La Liga. We'll talk about the NWSL. We'll talk about MLS. We'll talk about USL Championship. We will talk about Brazil. We'll talk about Mexico, Australia. There's lots of stuff happening worldwide. And we'll get into all that today. You guys have questions? Tweet at us at SoccerDownHere. You can send us an email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. You can send us a message on Twitch. If you are listening but not watching, you can watch on twitch.tv/SoccerDownHere. Send us a comment there. All as a way to be part of the show on a very busy Tuesday. What's up, John?
Bayern Munich minus 119 to win, courtesy of our friends at Odds Portal this morning.
Okay.
In Der Klassiker.
Okay, we'll get into the details on that here coming up. You're bent out of shape about La Liga for some reason?
Yes. Apparently, and this is alleged, so it's alleged bent out of shapeness.
Well, no, you're bent out of shape. Like, you can't be alleged bent out of shape. Like, you're either bent out of shape or you're not bent out of shape.
All right, fine, I've been out of shape.
Okay.
La Liga games will be broadcast with pre-recorded crowd noise when the season restarts, production company MediaPro has confirmed.
Well, that's what the Bundesliga is doing. What are you freaking out about? Everybody loved the Bundesliga doing it.
The way that this is presented, it doesn't have quite the romanticism and the effect that we saw in the Bundesliga.
Why not? It's pre-recorded crowd noise. That's what it said.
See, that to me just it comes across as the notion of, like we were saying on the show last night on SDH PM, just, they're holding up the applause sign. Cheer. So
John, that's not
waiting.
How it worked in Germany, though.
That's what I'm saying. The way that this is written gives that impression of cheer, and it's just going to be a dude hitting a button.
John, so what they wrote is the exact description of what is happening in Germany.
The Germans got it right. Let's see if La Liga can get it right. Just the way that this was presented and written to me, it's just like it's going to have that low, that low fake noise underneath where it's just like.
What did it say? Because I'm a little blown away by you reading about 20 different things into a sentence about pre-recorded crowd noise.
Yes. Organizations involved in the production of live games have since been scrambling in a bid to improve the atmosphere. Scrolling down even further, La Liga has been considering a number of options to enhance the audio-visual experience for spectators when matches return. Fan noise will be... this is what was bugging me.
Okay, I remember. This might be better.
The fan noise will be taken from past games in an attempt to recreate a similar atmosphere, whereas in reality, a very small number of club staff and broadcasters will be present.
No, it's not better. You do understand that you could, the sentence said, and about in La Liga, I'm going to paraphrase, broadcasters are considering ways to improve the atmosphere from an audio and visual standpoint, and they are taking pre-recorded noise from previous matches, and they will use that in the presentation of matches. Is that a fair paraphrase?
Yeah. That's a fair
You could
paraphrase.
say in the Bundesliga, broadcasters are figuring out ways to improve the audio atmosphere of a match, and they are taking pre-recorded noise from crowd noise from previous matches and using it in their matches, in their broadcasts. It's the same thing.
The way that this was written, though,
No,
it just...
no, stop.
Yes.
No, there's nothing about the way it's written. It's what you're reading into it. This is what it comes down to. As we said yesterday, it's not about the way it's written. It's not about La Liga. It's not about the Bundesliga. It's about the sound engineer or whoever is in charge of that. If it's a producer, if it is a sound engineer, whatever that role is, they have to be very good at what they do.
Yes.
But that's what it is. It's not about somebody writing, you're using pre-recorded crowd noise. That's exactly what you're going to do if you're going to use pre-recorded crowd noise. If you use it effectively, it works. I didn't like the idea of it, but in the Bundesliga, they nailed it. And they nailed it on multiple... You can hold up a sign all you want, John, but that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. You're missing the whole point. It is about the implementation of it. Using pre-recorded crowd noise, you're not using live crowd noise because there isn't any.
No,
So the only other alternative is pre-recorded. So it's all about how you use it. I'm not going to be the obstinate guy who says, well, I thought it was a bad idea, and I still think it's a bad idea. It doesn't matter if it was good. It's a bad idea. No, I was wrong. In Germany, the way they did it this past weekend was good.
Yes, it was.
Worked.
Yes.
So
I'm
why
agreeing
are
with
you assuming, and this is back to being negative, that in Spain they can't do the same thing? Of course they can. They're using pre-recorded crowd noise just the same way. They've got to do it right. And if they don't,
Yes.
whoever that person is going to get hammered. But when you read something, you are jumping to the conclusion that it's going to suck. And that's unfair. That's unfair to Spanish sound engineers. You need to apologize.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do. You need to apologize.
I want to see how it's implemented, and then I'll sit there and say that Brunswick stew is created in Georgia.
No, this is the whole stupidity we go through again. What was your famous sentence that you said? Until it happens, it ain't happening.
Yes.
That's idiotic, John, and you need to stop doing this nonsense. Give your Spanish sound engineers credit. You're all about giving producers and engineers and cameramen credit in what we do. Give your Spanish people the benefit of the doubt. That is very unfair.
Then the Daily Mail needs to write it better.
They wrote that you could take La Liga and put Bundesliga in it, and it's the exact same thing. You're trying to... You fell in the hole. You're trying to find the way out. You're climbing. You're grabbing the edge of the hole. The dirt's falling down on top of you. You need to just say, I'm gonna let this one go. I read into it, and I was wrong.
I went verbatim, and I want to see how it's being implemented.
That's dope. Oh, there you go, changing stuff again. Go ahead, have fun.
The Bundesliga, I enjoyed how the engineers pulled it off.
But what they wrote had nothing to do with the engineers. What they wrote, you could take Bundesliga and put it in place of La Liga, and it is the exact same thing. What I'm saying is it is down to the engineer, whoever's handling this on the broadcast, and I don't know how they're doing it. If it's the engineer, if it's the producer, whatever it is, they've got to use that tool effectively. If they don't, it's the same way as saying that, okay, let's change the whole structure here. If they say in La Liga we are going to use brand new cameras to do X, Y, and Z to improve the video of our broadcast, would you jump to a negative conclusion? No, you wouldn't, because it's all about the tool and how you use it. I mean, a camera is a camera. The cameraman is the one who makes it work.
But you would hope that they would use the camera in practice and figure out how it's going to be used.
So now you're
properly
assuming
instead
that they
of
don't
throwing
practice
it up.
anything in Spain. Again, you're insulting our Spanish producers and engineers, and I'm very, very upset about this, John. Why are you insulting the Spanish? The Germans did it right.
Yeah, they did.
Why don't you think the Spanish can?
Like I said, I'm going by what was written.
No. There you go again. It's not about the Daily Mail. It's about you jumping to a conclusion. Just wait. If it's bad, we're going to criticize it because it has the potential to be bad. Absolutely. But it also has the potential to be good, as we saw. I didn't think it could be good. I was wrong. They did a great job with it over the weekend. Hopefully Spain will do the same, but there's no reason to say that they can't do the same because they're using pre-recorded crowd noise, because that's what the Germans are doing. They're doing the same thing. It's down to the person doing it, just like it's down to the cameraman.
You're assuming they're doing the same thing. We don't know yet.
John, the Daily Mail article that got you so riled up, you could literally take La Liga out of it and put Bundesliga into it, and it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing.
Let's see how they do it.
The Germans always make good stuff.
Yeah, they do.
You will never admit you're wrong, and it's maddening. You know that?
This is the equivalent. The way that this was written is the equivalent of a laugh track for a bad sitcom.
No,
I want to see
it's
how
the exact same thing as what they're doing in Germany. The way it's described, it is the exact same thing. They are using pre-recorded crowd noise in the broadcast. That is what the decision they have made. That is what Germany is doing. You are assuming it is a laugh track, and let's also be fair to our laugh track friends. If you've watched some shows, they freaking need that laugh track because the jokes aren't good enough on their own.
Correct. Which means the show wasn't written well enough.
You're not writing Getafe and Real Sociedad. If it's a bad game, you might need a little extra noise in the background to make it palatable.
You ain't kidding.
So, okay, go ahead and be negative and insult our Spanish sound engineers and producers, and I will stand up for them, and I am excited to see what they do with their pre-recorded crowd noise, and if it's as good or better than Germany, you must apologize.
Fine.
Okay, there we go.
Chris Hutchison, by the way, is in early this morning. And he says that, and by the way, the Soccer Down Here mask is very, very stylish.
Yes.
His SDH mask arrived on Friday. How did you meaning you, sir, get the United States Postal Service to move so quickly?
Because the gentleman at the United States Postal Service at Briarcliff and Johnson Road is awesome. And he always takes care of whatever we're sending out very quickly, very promptly. He does not put up with any nonsense from other customers in the store. I like that. He had to stop 3 times while I was sending these out and tell somebody to respect the social distancing lines on the floor, which I was all about. So this guy is the best. So that's where I always go to ship stuff out, and they're very quick.
Michael Head says, not everyone liked the piped crowd-in noise on Bundesliga matches. He agrees with me. Boo.
No, he doesn't agree with you. You are trying to get back out of that hole, and you're pulling more dirt on you. Don't lie. You said you liked it.
I like the way that the Bundesliga. That's what I'm saying. I like.
That's not what you're saying.
I like the way the Bundesliga did it, especially the Mainz match. We talked about this yesterday.
You're pulling more dirt on top of yourself again. All right.
Basically, you're saying that I have the water hose with me inside the hole, and I'm just kind of sitting there spraying.
No, you don't have a water hose. You fell in the hole, and you're not understanding that somebody is putting a rope down to get you out, and you're just climbing and digging more dirt on yourself. The tweet was not saying that they liked Germany. You said you liked Germany. The tweet is saying, I don't like any of it. They are taking
So Michael Head's in a worse position in the hole than I am.
No, Michael Head is being consistent. I'm calling you out for not being consistent. Michael Head doesn't like any of it. He's not going to like it. He didn't like it in Germany. He's not going to like it in Spain. He doesn't like it anywhere. That's fine.
So piped in crowd noise is green eggs and ham for Michael Head.
You stay out of it for a second. Michael Head doesn't like it at all. He has not been convinced by the sound engineers in Germany. Okay. I was pleasantly surprised because I didn't think it could work. It worked. I still prefer natural sound. I would rather have that because of the potential for it not working well. But in Germany, they made it work, so I'll give them a ton of credit. You are flip-flopping. Like, I don't know, maybe Max Kellerman. I think he flip-flops. You said last night and over the weekend that you liked what Germany did, but now in a written description that you could substitute Bundesliga for La Liga, you are assuming that in La Liga it will be awful.
Mm-hmm. Because wasn't there one of the games that had in the Bundesliga this past weekend the enhanced audio experience that basically just gave you the crowd noise that just kind of went...
No, you're mixing up the terminology right now. It's not about that. The enhanced audio experience is what you can do in Germany, where in Germany you can watch the game with no enhanced audio experience and it's just natural sound, or you can watch it with the enhanced audio experience. There's no third way. It's one or the other. We got, and Fox here in the U.S. opted, I think, for most of the games. I don't know if they did it for every game. They opted to take the enhanced audio experience feed. So that's what they didn't just have a in the background on a game. That doesn't make any sense.
So, all right, let's see. Nathan Pugh has no sound for you.
I don't know if that means Nathan is anti fake crowd noise or pro fake crowd noise, or he has to wait and see. I'm going to assume you are in the wait and see.
Okay. And then
no, are you?
What, for La Liga?
No, in general, John. We're not, because we're not going to insult the Spanish sound engineers and Spanish producers again. In general, are you pro? Are you anti fake crowd noise, or are you wait and see?
I'm anti fake crowd noise because I like to hear all the conversations that go on the pitch line. I like to hear all the naughty words and all the conversations that go on. I like to hear coaches and players and things like that.
But if it's the German sound engineer, you're wait and see.
If it's Mainz, yeah. I mean, right now it's a case by case basis. The Mainz guy was great.
I will fully admit that I was anti going into it, and now I am in a wait and see. I will give it the benefit of the doubt and want to hear it. And if it's not good, it's not good. If it's good, it's good. It's just like you go to a club. Just because they got a DJ doesn't mean it's going to be good or not.
Correct.
You know, you got to hear what they do. So that's where I am at with it. But I am not going to assume that the Spanish can't do what the Germans did.
And Tafka says, if we could be wrestlers, we'd be hitting each other with chairs.
No, I would have already went to like a probably a sledgehammer. I would have probably went full Triple H by this point.
And so, of course, the gif that Tafka puts out is Triple H hitting Undertaker with a chair.
Yeah, there you go. I would have went to the sledgehammer by now, though.
Okay.
I'm very, very upset about your slander of the Spanish sound engineers.
I am looking at this in its verbatim sense, the way that it was written, and I'm like...
Yeah, okay.
The way it was presented to me is that you're just going to have the ooh or the yay.
The assumptions you are making, because that's not at all what it sounded like in the Germans at all. So don't even. You're making negative assumptions about Spanish sound engineers.
Chris Hutchison liked not hearing so much echo from the field during the games. Yeah,
it depends on the stadium. I mean, some didn't have that the first week, some did. I think Dortmund was the worst with it. The fact is, if you have a game behind closed doors at Mercedes-Benz, I think you'll have a good bit of echo just because of the way the stadium's structured. I think bigger, more enclosed venues are going to have that. And, that's just part of what it's naturally going to sound like. I think what's hard for the sound engineers who are figuring this out on the fly is you don't really get a chance to test what it sounds like behind closed doors for a game. You don't have anything to go on, so you're kind of winging it as you go. At least now, I think most teams in the Bundesliga have played a home game. So, when you get that game, you can at least go back and see what it sounded like before and make some adjustments. But it's tough. I mean, you're winging it, and it's the same thing. I mean, if you're doing the crowd noise and you're piping it in, you've probably never done that before. So you are winging it, and you've got to, I think Jess said it really well last night on our evening show. You've got to have somebody who understands the game, because they've got to know when to push this, when to bring this down, how to layer it so it doesn't sound so jarring when it switches. And they did a really good job with the Bundesliga games I saw over the weekend.
Yeah, like I said, the Mainz game for me was the one where I'm like, okay, it works here. But at the same time, I liked the idea of not having it. So it comes down to the DJ. That's bottom line, and how the DJ works in the room.
Spanish DJs can be good.
Daily Mail, write better copy.
No, that has nothing to do with it. More dirt on top of your head.
All right, what else is on your mind this morning, sir?
Has the Premier League started lighting itself on fire yet this morning? Because you have
Not
players
yet.
and managers who are discussing, debating, potentially voting on protocols to move forward. And this was from yesterday in The Guardian, Paul McInnes. The players and the managers got the rules for the return to contact training yesterday. They're voting on it today. Hey, Sunday night is when the government advice was updated. So, I mean, there's only so much you can do. They're moving it as quick as they can. The advice from the government isn't going to help you a ton. It's just setting very broad parameters across all sports. So each sport has to create their own parameters within it. Now, updated stuff on the Premier League. You've had a week of training. You've had 8 positive tests from 1,744 in total, players and coaching staff. Some players and coaching staffs have been tested twice now in that. So, not bad. Big area of uncertainty, and I've seen this described all over the place. In the protocol, and this is coming from the government side, and the league has added it. If a player doesn't fail a test, but comes into contact while training with someone who does fail a test, the advice of Public Health England is that player would isolate for 14 days. If you have small training groups, which is the next step in England, of 6 players, for example, one test, then one positive test, then all of those players have to go isolate for 14 days. Now, I've seen some reports this morning that in factories in England, there is some kind of special dispensation from that they have to test positive as well. Maybe show symptoms, might be something in between, but it's not an automatic 14 days away. And the idea was that rule is going to be adapted for soccer teams. So let's see, because I think we're getting to a point now that we're learning enough about this. Do you have to increase the testing of those players? Yeah, 100%. But is it an automatic, well, they tested negative, they've got 2 negative tests, but one player in their group tested positive, so they have to isolate 2? I think we've gotten to a point that we understand that's not necessarily the right way to move forward here. And we'll see. Again, we're all learning this as we go, but now we've got data from Germany, from Spain, from England with testing and with varying levels of contact and training and matches, and we're not seeing the situation where a player tests positive and then all these other players on the team test positive. We're seeing some isolated cases of 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, but not this widespread outbreak. And for me, it all comes down to the testing. If you have the proper amount of testing, and if you are in a position to increase testing when you have something like this happen, that's the better way of dealing with it than just automatically saying, well, no, you didn't test positive, you're good, you're not feeling any symptoms, you're healthy, but you were around somebody who did, so we're going to treat you like you have it. I don't know if that's the right way to move forward at this point.
Yeah, and news out of the Prem when it comes to positive testing. Bournemouth keeper Aaron Ramsdale says that he was one of the 2 individuals who tested positive for coronavirus in the latest round of tests. 996 players and staff tested in the second round last week. Ramsdale was one of the two. He had tested negative last Monday. He was asymptomatic, but then he comes back with a positive test.
Yeah, Sky Sports had a conversation with Ramsdale, and he figures that the infection would have occurred on a trip to the shops because he did test negative 3 days before. He hasn't had any symptoms, so it's not like he tested negative, but he wasn't feeling good. Now, as we know, players can be asymptomatic and spread, but I think we're still kind of getting our head around, all right, he tested negative 3 days before, but then he tests positive 3 days later. Does that mean he could have had it 3 days before? I mean, you do have false tests. It's a very low percentage, but according to the numbers, out of 900 or so, 800 or so you're testing in a round, could you have one or two false tests? Yeah, that's within that margin of error. But that's probably the limit of how many false tests you're going to have. And that's why you're starting to see an idea and a push, and more governing bodies talk about 2 tests in a short period of time. That's why in the SEC, for example, they're talking about 2 tests in a 72-hour period before they return to campus. I believe in MLS that was part of the conversation about going to Orlando. It could be part of the conversation when it comes to the NWSL, because the odds of 2 false test results in a very short period of time are very, very high. And that's what's tricky. Kefsey chimes in on the Twitch chat and says you can also have it, but not enough to show in a test until it increases in your system in a few days. That's why the amount of testing is going to be so key here. And that's why I have such a huge issue with the SEC's idea of not doing regular testing. There's no way that's going to work. It's incredibly risky and dangerous. And I don't know how that gets approved by a university president. I have no idea how you can try to move forward with that. You have to, because you're not putting those players in a lockdown scenario either. So, you have to have regular testing. I think the minimum levels of acceptable regular testing that we're seeing across most leagues is 2 tests a week. And one of those tests immediately before a game, so like 24 hours before. Whatever shortest period of time where you can ensure getting the results back before the game. That's kind of the minimum standard here. I'm almost starting to wonder, and with this comes cost, should that increase? Should you get to a 3 tests a week kind of norm here? That's going to be expensive, but these are things that we're all kind of figuring out as we go now that we're starting to do a massive amount of testing. We're learning about the testing, too. We're learning about, as Kefsey says, there's starting to be studies that are showing you can have it, you can spread it, but you can test negative because you don't have enough. Well, what I would want to know about that is what is your likelihood of spread? What is your rate of spread? If you don't have enough in your system to test positive, are you really able to spread it very much? That's different than asymptomatic. Asymptomatic has nothing to do with a test result. Asymptomatic is you could be positive, 5 times in a week, but you don't feel sick. That's a different conversation. I'm talking about people who test negative and then later test positive, and the idea is that, they had some of the virus in their system, but it hadn't spread enough in their system to test positive. Then my question is, could they spread it to others? And that's what we don't know yet. Now, as Kefsey says, we're all still figuring this stuff out. I would assume, and this is just thinking logically without the science to back it up, that if you don't have enough in your system to test positive, I'd say it's probably less likely that you're able to spread it in that scenario, but I don't know. And these are the things that do affect the safety levels of coming back to play.
Yeah, you had mentioned, where was the quote that you got from Ramsdale? Is that from...
It's from Sky Sports.
Okay, so he says that to Sky. He tells the BBC, he says, I've not been in contact with anybody, and I've got it. When you haven't had it, and you've just been following the rules and only gone to the shop, that was obviously scary at first. He's going to self-isolate now for 7 days.
Yeah, and that's fine. I think we're starting to see, and I've already seen it on NWSL Twitter, about now we're going to start arguing about, well, they're testing for 5 days, or they're doing training for 5 days, or they're self-isolating for 7 days, and should it be 14, or should it be 10, or should it be 21, or we don't know. I mean, these are all different situations, and I think it's very easy to question it because none of us know. Scientists are still figuring it out too, because there's not like there's a global playbook here to refer to from when this happened 5 years ago. We're all figuring this stuff out. So, just like John needs to give the benefit of the doubt to Spanish sound engineers, let's give the benefit of the doubt to the people who are working in this and figuring it out on the fly. The 7-day isolation thing, okay, I think that would probably be combined with testing, and if he tests negative twice, which is what most people are going by, if that happens in 5 days, then okay, come back and play. If it doesn't happen in the 7 days, if he still doesn't test negative twice in the 7 days, he should stay out longer.
Yeah.
Like the 7 days, I don't think it's a hard and fast rule here at this point. And that's what is so hard with all of it, because if you're trying to keep up with this and you're following things, they're changing on sometimes an hourly basis. And you have to constantly stay engaged with it. I mean, I'll tell y'all from a soccer perspective, I've got all of my news sources, and I typically use Reddit as like my first place, because Reddit's great about posting articles as they happen in different places. So I've got all of my Reddit subscriptions and things in one place, and I'm checking it minimum 3 times a day for news as it comes, because I want to make sure I know how things are coming out. Because you're seeing, like, sometimes, the initial report has a lot of detail, and then later reports don't. Sometimes it's the opposite. The initial report's just a very basic headline, a lot of conjecture, then you start to get real information in quotes later. It's the same thing with this. Like, originally, and that's 2 months ago, it was somebody tests positive in a team, put everybody not in self-isolation, in quarantine for 14 days. Okay, we've moved on from that. But now it's still kind of all over the place as you handle it. I keep coming back to that testing thing, because if you're doing the testing correctly, and yes, there is a margin of error and you're accounting for that, the idea of you test positive, you're kept away from the group because you're positive and you could spread it, and then when you test negative twice, you should be okay. You should be okay to return. I think we're okay with that now, because as we've seen, even without that stringent of a situation, a bunch of people are not testing positive because somebody else did in a team. I think if you're looking at this from a fan perspective, from a questioning the safety of it, Germany, we haven't had an outbreak after 2 weeks of games. England, we've had 2 rounds of tests. We've had a week of training. You've had 8 positive tests total. Spain, I think it was 8 positive tests across the first and second division as well in their first round of numbers, and I haven't seen more. That's 3 big leagues that have similar protocols in place for where they're at, and they've been able to, 1, come in without a lot of the virus in the player pool, and 2, then not have it spread. And when cases have happened, they've handled it and mitigated it and moved on. That should give every other league that's come in later, I think, some comfort in understanding that, hey, this is contagious. This is scary, and we've got to do all these things to make sure that we don't have spread. But if you do the right things, you can handle this, and you can make it work right now. And I think that's a really good sign.
For me, and I know that the catchphrase has been testing, testing, testing. It is always going to be the phrase for me, and we're learning more about what frequency might be to make sure that you have it under control. What frequency has been in the past, where folks have come up with game plans to sit there and monitor. I think that there are certain scenarios out there that are cause for concern. See college football when it comes to not announcing enough testing procedures, and that's an entirely different rabbit hole.
One thing about college football, I don't think we can even look at it as college football. I think it's conference by conference, and that's what's so difficult in the NFL, the Premier League. You're talking about a league. You're talking about 20 teams. You're talking about 30 teams, whatever. In college football, you're talking about 10 of those, and at all different parts of the country, all different levels of financial heft across the map. I mean, how many D1 conferences are we talking about? 10, 12?
10 with 135 member schools in Division I.
And 5 of them are huge, and 5 of them are smaller, and even within those conferences, I mean, Michigan's president, the University of Michigan's president, has come out and said, if we don't have students on campus this fall, we're not playing intercollegiate sports. And if we don't have students on campus this fall, we're not having students on campus in the spring. Now, he's been very strong on that, and maybe you could say too strong. And he hasn't made that decision yet about students on campus in the fall. He's saying that if he makes it, you're not playing football. Well, the Big Ten's not going to not play football because of Michigan. Then they're going to have to figure that out. I would assume Michigan State could be a different decision because this is the president of the school, the University of Michigan. Other schools in Michigan are moving towards having students on campus and moving towards whatever resumption of individual training they can do on the football side. So every conference is different, I would assume, because the NCAA is not taking the lead on this, and that's very disappointing because they would be the ones who could say you have to have a minimum level of testing. They're leaving it to the conferences. And what has come out on the SEC side, and I haven't seen other conferences yet. I don't know if they've made those decisions. Louisville, I think, is going to be one of the first teams back tomorrow with their individual training. And I don't know if that's an ACC decision or if Louisville's just like, we can do what we want. Get out of our way. Yeah. Well, the SEC has talked about what it looks like for players to return, and it's going to be June 8th. They wanted a little more time to put protocols in place. And the return, as I said, I think is really smart. You're doing antibody testing. You have to have 2 negative tests in 72 hours to come back to campus. That's good. I think that makes sense. It's once you get back to campus, they're not talking about regular testing. Now, I don't think that's a safe way to do this. The reason why they're not doing it, you want to be completely honest? Money. Mm-hmm. You're talking about to do the level of testing that other leagues are doing twice a week for a football program on campus. You're talking for a season, $20 million? Easy? Yep. And that's not talking about other COVID-19 related expenditures with increased cleaning, with the equipment to do that, with the personnel to do that, other protocols you got to do. So you're talking about the SEC potentially playing games behind closed doors this season, making a boatload of TV money. And if I'm worried about cost for testing, I'm talking to sponsors. Get it sponsored. Mm-hmm. Get a TV sponsor on board with it.
The SEC would be one of the first ones to get sponsors for that kind of stuff.
COVID-19 testing brought to you by Regions Bank. I mean, whatever. Do it.
It's time to expect more.
Otherwise, it's risky. But you're talking $20 million. I mean, Major League Baseball to do what they're talking about doing, 14,500 tests, I believe, is what is being said from their deputy commissioner to reporters. Well, that's, you're getting into that $15 million kind of range for that. The NBA to finish the season, and I don't know if this is in the just playoff teams participating model or if it's with the play-in tournament idea that they have with 24 teams, or if it's everybody. They're talking about 15,000 tests. And a basketball team is a smaller roster, smaller group than a baseball team, which is a much smaller group than a football team. So keep those things in mind. But yeah, you're talking, for these leagues, for these teams to operate, you're in the $15-20 million kind of range for a season, to finish a season, what have you. That's not easy to do. And that's why you're seeing some smaller teams opt not to finish the current season, and some smaller leagues talk about not starting back until you can have fans in the stand, because those leagues, those clubs, cannot afford to do the amount of testing that is needed to be safe. I think when we're having this conversation too much in this country in a sporting sense, we're not talking that way. There's an assumption that if it's an American sports team, well, they're not going to go out of business, and they're not going to, not have the money to spend on this. I don't think you can assume those things anymore. I don't think you can assume those things, because you're also looking at a strong likelihood of at least part of your season being played behind closed doors and no revenue coming in. Now, the NFL, you got big TV money. You can handle that a lot easier. The NHL, you got TV money coming in, but MLS, NWSL, bigger. Like the lacrosse league, they're talking about doing something in Utah, actually, at the same place that NWSL is talking about. And it would be a tournament, because that's all they can really afford to do right now. And that's part of this conversation, even in this country. And I think maybe it's just because of our issues with the testing side of it, and it's only now that, I still see arguments about not having the testing capacity. It feels like an old argument. We talked about it like 2 weeks ago, that with the Orlando idea, Florida has the same level of testing capacity roughly as Germany does. And in Germany, they have, they're handling the virus and you don't have as much of a need for tests. In Florida, you're not using all the tests that are available. It's the same that's happening in Georgia right now. Now, are there parts of the country where that's not the case? Probably. I don't know for sure. But the testing capacity has increased to the point that I think we can rule out the idea that pro sports shouldn't come back because you can't take tests away from the public. I think we're past that now. Now, that doesn't take away the cost, and that's going to be the major issue going forward. Minor League Baseball, I don't know how they function this year. USL Championship, that's not going to be easy to make it work. And I know the argument is you can't cut the players' pay, but are these teams going to be able to afford six figures of testing to finish a season out, and pay salaries and pay other costs to be safe and not have game day revenue? There's going to be some who can't. That has to be understood. Do you want that to be the case? No. Do you want players? I know the Daily Mail had a report about some English players who, if contracts get canceled, that's going to affect some visa situations for some players who are here. Nobody wants that to happen. Nobody. But the reality is it might, because you might not be able to play a season. Now, my hope is that teams would find a way to protect those players and those families who are in those situations, and I think they need to. I think they have that obligation. But this idea that you can't talk about cutting pay, I have to disagree with it, because you're talking potentially about 6 to 7 figures of costs added to an already thin budget and subtracting pretty much all of your revenue. If you can make that work, let me know. And I don't think every ownership group in the USL is in a position to eat those costs. I don't know how that's the case. That minor league baseball article that I shared last week scared the living daylights out of me when it came to grassroots sports in this country. Everything below the major leagues. Because the numbers are all the same. You know, you're renting venues, you're paying big costs for things, you have your payroll, nobody's making a ton of money, and now to play, you're going to subtract revenue, pretty much all of it, and you're going to add on a bunch of costs to be able to do it safely. There's not a lot of businesses, whether you're a minor league baseball team, a lower division soccer team, a lacrosse team, you know, the G League. I don't know what the G League looks like in the NBA. At least a lot of that is subsidized, but not all of it. There's some teams that it just won't make sense to continue. It's why the XFL went away. It's why, if you are a smaller organization, the cost of doing this safely, and small college football, you're going to see programs that can't afford to field a team this year. Because the cost for, and it came up yesterday when I was on 92.9 The Game, Lynn Scarborough from the Lindy's magazines, which have been going on for years and years and years. I've read them as a kid. Alcorn State is playing Auburn, right? First game, supposedly?
Mm-hmm. First home game. Their first game is against North Carolina.
Okay. But at least six figures going to Alcorn State to come take that trip.
Yep.
That might not happen because they might not be allowed to have fans. Okay? That doesn't happen. Alcorn State's budget for the season is blown. Because for a lot of those schools, those games fund not even just your football team. For some schools, those fund your athletic department. And the problem is the cost to operate in terms of safety. It's the same for Auburn as it is for Alcorn State. It's the same for Manchester United as it is for Hartlepool. You know, I mean, it's the same. That doesn't change because of how big the club is. This is a cost of operating safely that is about testing, that is about equipment, that is about personnel. It doesn't change based off the level. It can't change. That's the problem, is it can't. You can't have smaller teams come back, risk it because they can't afford to do enough testing, and then have an outbreak. Can't have that happen. But you have different financial structures. Bigger teams, maybe they can find a way to afford it. Maybe they can make it work. Smaller teams, it's too much.
To answer your question of Alcorn State, Alcorn State's getting $475,000 in the current environment to go to Auburn and play Auburn. That $475,000 funds a boatload of stuff at Alcorn, and that's why you see these 1AA, the FCSs, take these paydays. They know they're going to get whipped. They know that they've got, you know, in some instances, they've got a tremendous halftime show, so the fans will be interested, but it's to fund a lot of things downstream. And if you don't have these paydays, then all of that normal stuff, the women's basketball program, your Title IX sports, your non-revenues, that trickle-down effect gets absolutely clipped. And then having to add on the notion of paying for testing, consistent testing, and making sure that your student athletes are, you know, able to be on campus, then it's just a bunch of different effects and a bunch of different avenues here. And you're going to see some teams. We've already seen programs that have been blown up because of this, and not just football, but you're seeing a lot of other schools. We've mentioned Furman and Bowling Green and a bunch of others. But, yeah, you're already seeing the effects, and teams and universities being they're at the front of the line and making sure that they can make their ends meet, and some of them are knocking out football.
No, I don't think anybody's knocked out football yet. Let's not say that
Florida,
hasn't happened.
Florida Tech in Division II has, and there was one in Division III.
Okay. Nobody in D1 has, right?
Not D1 yet. We haven't gotten to FCS and D1 yet, but we have seen D2 and D3.
Well, let me make sure that we're making this clear. Are those programs taking a hiatus, or are they ending their football programs?
Ending their football programs.
Okay. That can be a lot of things factoring into this. This could be what puts it over the top. So let's be clear on that. But article from the Associated Press on the SWAC, and I know we're talking college football and soccer down here, but you're talking about programs and organizations the size of lower division teams. And honestly, with some more testing than that would be needed, because you're talking about a larger player roster. But the financials, it's very similar. The SWAC, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, their commissioner said if we don't have fans in the stands from a revenue perspective, it's going to be extremely difficult for us to have a football season. And this is a conference that has been, they've led the FCS, the level below the top division, in average home attendance for 42 of the past 43 years. So it's smaller programs, but you mentioned the bands. You have an experience going to these games. That's why the attendance is high. That's why the revenue is good. That's why you can continue to do these things. But their commissioner, Charles McClellan, said, I can tell you the Southwest Athletic Conference playing without fans would be a huge detriment to our overall business model. If we don't have fans in the stands, it's going to be difficult for us to pay the bills to put on our program. And then the flip side is this, like Prairie View is supposed to play TCU in September and Louisiana Tech the next week. If they can't play those games, they'd have to slash the budget. And the athletic director, Alicia Pete, has already talked to volleyball and soccer coaches to say they might have to cut their games to just conference games. That's it. We've heard a lot of that with smaller programs, is that some of the non-revenue sports are going to have to only play a conference schedule. We've seen conferences elect to cut their tournaments down to, instead of sending 8 teams or everybody somewhere to go do it, they're going to have 4 teams and they're going to do it on campus. These things are real, and these things are scary when it comes to the sports business. They're across all sports. This is not one sport, and others aren't dealing with it. There are teams, there are leagues that can manage it better because they have more money to work with, or they have TV revenue that is not going to be affected as strongly. There's others who can't, and we're going to see it across the board. High school sports will be affected. I would assume that there's going to be some high schools that can't play this year in the fall because they don't have the money to do the proper testing. Or what scares me is they're not going to mandate the proper testing and they're going to play, and who knows what happens. Then you're rolling the dice. And these things are all very scary. So, this is all part of the conversation, and it's just stuff to keep in mind. I think what we're learning is that the key to doing it safely is your testing procedure. The protocols are pretty much the same when it comes to returning to action to limit interaction, but football's a contact sport, basketball's a contact sport, soccer's a contact sport. Maybe it's a little different for baseball, but you have the catcher, the umpire, different batters rotating through, but they're hanging around each other for long periods of time. You've got to do the proper amount of testing to handle it, to identify when someone tests positive, and then remove them from the group so it doesn't spread further. If you don't do that, you're going to have problems. And I really hope that we have some leaders in conferences, in sports, in leagues here in the U.S. that don't opt to skimp on the testing because of cost. You cannot do that.
Yeah, that's the thing that we all need to look at. I am completely and totally agreement with you about having to monitor, and you've got to have the testing to do it. I'm going to continue to hammer this point home. Testing. That's what's going to give you all the information that you need, and the frequency of the testing gives you frequency of information, bottom line.
Yeah. Jarrett chimes in on our chat, and Greg McGarity, athletic director at UGA, was on 92.9 this morning, and Greg McGarity said, we're planning for a full house, talking about fans in the stands. Is that realistic? Time will tell. We have several internal documents ready to activate, but we don't want to go public, especially in May. Totally understand that. I don't know if I would be saying we're planning for a full house. I've seen others say that, but immediately counter with, yes, we are planning for a full house, but we also have plans and scenarios where it is half full or a quarter full. Nobody knows. I mean, it is May. Let's understand that. You're talking about games last week of August, I think, this season in college football.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's that last weekend of August, and high schools are 2 weeks before that.
Yeah. It's May. It's also not that far away, and
Nope.
we don't know. We don't know. But again, Georgia and Texas A&M are the only two schools in the country that, if you don't have fans in the stands, they've got the money to not be, flipping their budget over. They won't be losing money if that happens. But you also want to plan to have as much revenue as possible. It's tough. I get it. I don't know if I would be so bold in saying it that way, but I get it. I understand the logic behind it. We'll see. And it's all going to feed off of itself. And that's what is somewhat scary about it. And that's why we're talking about football. Because if UGA has a full stadium in September, if the Atlanta Falcons have a full stadium in September, what is the reaction going to be about MLS or Atlanta United saying we're not going to have a full stadium? We're going to have 20% or 50%. I don't think they could do it in that scenario. And that's what is worrying to me, that the SEC is coming out with a testing protocol, which was not finalized when that document came out last week. That does have to be made very clear. But that document had nothing about testing on campus. The idea was that you would test if somebody shows symptoms, which I think we all know is not the smart way to handle this. So those leagues, those teams are going to set the agenda, and I hope they are being responsible in doing it. Germany, the Bundesliga, has talked about responsibility from day one. NASCAR has talked about responsibility early on, and they've been very, very deliberate. I've been really impressed with NASCAR during this. I'm not a NASCAR guy. No offense if you're a NASCAR guy. I don't watch it on a regular basis. I don't get the cycles and series things and how they've changed the rules. It's not just you're running for 500 miles. Like, you've got different sections of, I don't know. I got nothing. But they have been very deliberate in talking about protocol, making sure, and not by accident, showing drivers in masks, all these kinds of things that, look, they're not potentially playing to their base here. They're taking that responsibility on because they have come back quick. And by all accounts, they've handled things really well. And it's been good for them from a business perspective, and they're moving forward. You've got to take the responsibility on. I really worry that with athletic directors, with college football, with the NFL being so gung-ho, that it's going to force others to be more gung-ho than maybe we should be at the moment.
Yeah, and I also have to give the fans of NASCAR a lot of credit, because you're not seeing them congregating outside the raceways. You're not seeing them camping out and showing their support for any of their drivers. I mean, if you're looking at traffic outside of the raceways, it is speed limit speed. Folks are just going right by the racetrack, and they're doing their thing. So I think that the NASCAR community gets a lot of credit early on here for how they're doing things in the States.
They haven't been piling up outside the raceway. In Germany, you have not had fans gathering outside of stadiums.
Nope.
That's been a huge concern. In England, was talking to Willie P at 92.9 yesterday, and it's something he's been worried about with college football. If you play behind closed doors, are fans going to gather outside of stadiums? You have to be, I think, very intentional if you are the league, the team, the home team especially. You have to work with your police, obviously, but you have to really go forward with a campaign of information to say, no, this is not what we want, this is not what we can have, this is not what we're going to do here. We're asking you, begging you, imploring you not to come hang outside the stadium, because you're not getting in and you're making it worse for all of us and potentially putting future games at risk. That's what it's going to take. But right now, what we're hearing for athletic directors and the NFL is it's all speed ahead. We're all good. And maybe it is by September. I don't know. I hope it is. I really, really hope it is. I hope that we're not talking ourselves into a position that we can't back out of, and that's what worries me. But we'll see.
Let's see. A couple of folks have popped in on the Twitters. And Katie Weaver, back to our DJ discussion.
What's up, Katie?
She says, maybe sound engineers should go full morning zoo and just hit the soundboard all game. A little crowd noise, yakety sax, WWE sound bites, Blur, Stephen A. Smith, stuff like that.
See, I would enjoy that, but I think purists would lose their freaking minds and just go insane on it. I'd find it entertaining.
Could you imagine, like, the drop?
We have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived.
So that would be after the referee makes a bad call.
Yes.
But see, you've got to see if you're going to do that, you've got to have it in the stadium so the players hear it too.
Yes.
You know, a kind of bad call that you disagree with. But we've seen, like, stadium PA people be fined, fired, suspended for doing that kind of stuff before, though. So
yeah, you get a ref holding up a card. React to me.
Yeah, you're playing Three Blind Mice. You know, It's like, oh, I can't do that. That's not good.
Shiva has a question with MLS. She wants to know, when are MLS teams planning on starting group training, and do you see it getting postponed again?
You can't have it now. Right now it's under the training moratorium through June 1st, and I don't think they're going to make an announcement until they know what's going to happen with the Orlando situation. That's going to determine when you start group training. I do think you're getting closer to that. Either way, if Orlando is going to happen, the idea originally was June 1st. I don't see that being the case now that we don't have an answer right now. Could it be a week later? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, from an MLS timeline perspective, the way I look at it, they've got to get the financials sorted out first. What's the pay cut going to be? How much? How is it going to be structured? Get the sign off on that. Everything CBA related, finalize it, nail it down, agree. Can't do anything else until you do that. You do that, you can probably have the Orlando plan as like the next thing you're voting on, the next step. It's probably all going to be interconnected anyway. According to a Paraguayan radio program yesterday, it was Football a lo Grande. Christian Paredes of the Portland Timbers said, most teams agreed to go to Orlando. We didn't. Don't know any details on that. Also not a surprise that there would be teams that would have, you know, voting groups that vote no. And some team might have a full team that says no. Portland, according to Christian Paredes, is one that did. Not surprised. But you've got to get the buy-in from whatever percentage. You have to get approval to move forward. And you also have to understand that you're probably going to have some players who opt out. And I think you do have to allow that.
Yeah.
And does that affect pay? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm not in a position to sit here and tell owners who are staring at combined, you know, potentially billions of dollars of a loss this year. I'm not in a position to tell them how to spend their money. And I'm not going to tell you that I am. I hope they would do everything possible for the players, because without players, you don't have a league. But I would hope they do everything possible for their staffs as well, and do everything, most importantly, to sustain themselves and come back. Because we don't want to see any teams go away because of this. Other countries, that's going to happen. Here, I don't think it's going to happen with MLS, but you're talking combined loss. I believe it was Carl Lindner of Cincinnati who said this. You know, potentially combined over $1 billion. When you start looking at, if it's 90% of revenue is from the gate, and you're combining all the revenue around the league, and you're not having a gate, well, I mean, do the math. Like, yeah. So you've got to get the money sorted out, because MLS is going to lose money every game they play. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's bringing that up. Every game that MLS plays, they will lose money on putting the event on right now. It's a fact. Tell me how it's not. You're not making enough TV money. You're going to have to spend on testing. You're going to have to spend on other COVID-19 related things. You're not making any gate money. There's no way the math works out to where you are making money on a behind closed doors game. A lot of leagues in that situation are not playing. MLS is trying to find a way to play that is limiting the damage, but still positioning themselves to move forward when you can have fans back in the stands. If 90% of your revenue is tied up in fans, you want to do everything possible to mitigate the damage while you can't have fans and be ready to really do it big when you can. It's that simple. So they've got to get the money situation sorted out with the players. I think the players, for the most part, understand this. And I think they get it. And I think they're going to find a way to work with the owners and get it done. If Orlando is the way to keep costs down while getting games in and getting restarted as quickly as possible, they've got to convince the players of it. And look, the number one way you convince people of doing that job is paying them. And that's where it's going to come down to is this tournament going to have, I don't know, are you going to put win bonuses on it? Are you going to incentivize teams to do well in it? Are you going to incentivize appearance bonuses? I don't know. I don't know what you're going to do. But you've got to get your pay cut negotiation nailed down. You've then got to convince the players of your restart plan, whether it's Orlando, more hubs, not doing hubs, whatever it is. And you've got to get a season under your belt, even with losing $1 billion to do it. I mean, it's insane. That's what we're talking about at this point. You've got to make the decision as a league because they can't not do it. Yeah. They can't be the ones that say, well, the NFL's going to have people in the stands. University of Georgia's talking about a full house in September. We can't come out and say we're not going to play because we can't afford to. You're forever branded as minor league at that point. MLS can't do that. So they've got to sit there and stare at the bank accounts and say, we're potentially going to lose $1 billion this year. Billion! So when you're wondering why there's haggling over negotiations and pay cuts, billion! You cannot hide that. You can't leave that out of the conversation. It's incredibly hard what these teams across the world are dealing with right now. It's not just an MLS thing, but MLS has got tougher decisions because of the other major sports in this country, and they can't look inferior. It's hard. And I think for Shiva's question, they've got to get the CBA and pay stuff sorted out. Then they've got to get their restart plan sorted out. Then you can backdate starting the team and group training. You've still got 3 teams that aren't doing individual training right now. Chicago, San Jose, and DC. I think DC can solve that pretty easily by going to either Maryland or Virginia. I'm not sure which one would work better or where you'd have better luck. You've got ways to do it. Or Delaware, like Philadelphia did, a little bit further away. San Jose, I don't know the situations there, but with the other California teams in Los Angeles being able to train, I would think maybe they can find us an alternative. Chicago, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's another nearby area that you can go to, but those 3 are still not training. New York City, I think, is training today. Red Bulls trained yesterday. Montreal was starting training this week. Those were 3 of the 6 that were left after New England started training.
Turner Kirby says that he's seeing Walt Disney World is going to submit their reopening plans sometime this week. He would not be surprised if NBA and MLS are a part of said plan that's being submitted. Either it could delay the opening or they have a plan to co-opt the two.
I wonder if it would have anything to do with it. I think it might not. And Turner's been really helpful with a lot of the stuff around Disney that I haven't known as much of. So thank you, Turner, for keeping us informed. I would assume that the leagues involved would want to keep whatever they're doing at Disney completely private from any public reopening.
Yeah.
Because then you don't want to get into the issues with potential fans or guests at Disney facilities just showing up. They can't do that because then you get back to the lack of testing and changing the environment and players potentially testing positive after coming in contact with somebody from outside their group and all that kind of stuff. So I'd assume they're separate. Maybe behind the scenes they have to do with one another, and they probably could in terms of personnel and resources, but publicly I don't think they're going to have to do with one another.
Katie Weaver's back in. She says if a certain number of players opt out on each team, foresee more fluidity in being able to bring up USL players to fill roster spots for a tourney without contracts. That's a question. She's wondering if we see more of that. A highly paid star with a pregnant wife may want no part of an Orlando quarantine, but a hungry 19-year-old would love that paycheck.
Yep, I think that's what you'll see. It's going to be a weird season. And, you're already seeing it in general sports conversation here. It's like, is every championship going to have an asterisk by it? No, I don't think it is. But I think when we go back and talk about it, there's going to be things that come up in the story of that season. You could argue that it's more difficult to win a championship right now because of what you're dealing with. I would probably make that argument if you are an LAFC, for example, that could potentially go to Orlando for 5 games in your regular season and not have Carlos Vela because his wife is expecting, I think, getting fairly close to a due date. You're not going to be able to risk that if you're Carlos Vela, and that's understandable. It's in a normal situation. Let's try to remember what the real world used to be like. Carlos Vela would have missed a game or two anyway. He more than likely, unless the scheduling just fell to his favor, and he was at home for 2 games, and you didn't miss a game because of the birth date and all that kind of stuff. Okay, maybe you would have got lucky, but probably you would have missed at least a game, maybe 2 games. So you can't go to Orlando and be away and not have an easy way to get back because travel's not just a simple thing at the moment. So there's lots of challenges. And if LAFC wins a championship in 2020 after having to go through part of this without Carlos Vela, well, I give them more credit. I'm not putting an asterisk by it to diminish it. I'm giving them more credit for dealing with the adversities of it.
Chris Hutchison, back to our NASCAR discussion, and I vaguely remember that a track was already doing this to raise money. Chris says that NASCAR ought to let people drive their cars around the track for a donation of, say, $25 a lap.
That's actually really cool. You have to sign all kinds of waivers, though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if
about an inch thick.
Yeah, I don't know if my Kia Soul tires are going to allow me to really push it hard at Atlanta Motor Speedway.
Would the weight let you deal with the angles in turn 1 and turn 2?
I would stay very low. I would not be getting up high up against that wall. Yeah, I would have to sign extra papers because of my Kia Soul. So it's a cool idea. I wonder if you could find a way to mitigate the safety element of that.
I had Tony. Well, actually, I was in a car with Tony Stewart once, and it was a sedan, and it was part of the promotion of the races down at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And he took you right up against the wall, and then stopped the car, just to give you the idea about what that angle is all about. And there were 4 of us in the car. Tony was driving. There were 2 of us, and then I was in the passenger seat at the very back, and I'm up against the wall, and I'm loving every minute of this, and I'm leaning into the turn so the car doesn't flip over and everything. And Tony, he's just got the car stopped, and he's gesticulating wildly, and the other 2 people in the car are freaking out. They're like, "Can you move the car, please, and get it away from the wall and not from this angle?" So, it was an interesting perspective.
Yeah, there's a big difference though. Tony Stewart is a trained driver who knows that track pretty well. You were not driving said car.
No. Although that you could do, would you do the Richard Petty driving experience if you had the chance?
Maybe. I don't know if I'd want to do it on a NASCAR track though. I'd probably want to do if there was a road track or something. The walls and the banking would be the thing that I'm not a big fan of. Cash on Twitch says they do Christmas lights at Bristol, but they make you drive on the apron. Okay, I could do that.
Okay.
I could do that. I'm not taking it up the bank.
No.
Not my Kia, anyway.
Yeah, that's bumblebees in a washer dryer.
If I still had the old Monte Carlo as a different conversation, then
yes.
maybe we would do it with that, because that was like a NASCAR pace car edition. So maybe so.
Turner has a question about international travel, and I think Nick addressed this last week.
Okay.
Turner asks, would an issue arise with international travel for both the Orlando bubble and the continuation of the season normally with Toronto FC, Montreal Impact, and Vancouver Whitecaps? He says he'd be asking on Twitch, but the phone line was cut by his dad with a tiller, so there's no Wi-Fi.
Nice. Well, not nice. I mean, sorry.
Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, seriously. That sounds like something that would be happening at John's house right about now.
Yeah. And I would be the one doing it.
Yeah, of course. I don't know the details on the Canada and U.S. travel situation right now. Do you know?
I think Nick said that his interpretation of it would be that the Canadian government would have to designate the personnel attached to those three teams as essential personnel and essential businesses. That way, going over the U.S.-Canada border would be easier than just having to do it once, go back, have the same quarantine issues, go back, and all that kind of stuff. You'd have to be deemed essential.
There's ways around that. I mean, if the NHL is talking about one of the scenarios they've got on the books is to have a group of teams playing in a U.S. venue and a group of teams playing in a Canadian venue, they're figuring out how to navigate that. So there's probably paperwork and sign-offs and stamps involved, but it's doable.
Yep. Would you like for me to say hi to one of our sponsors?
Yes, I would very much like for you, John Nelson, to say hello and thank you to one of our great sponsors.
Hello and thank you to Apolinski and Associates, LLC, proud supporters of the SDH Network and everything soccer down here. AA-legal.com. If you want to get in touch with them, wrongful death and serious injury attorneys, over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for their clients in Georgia and Alabama. A couple of ways that you can get in touch with Stephen Apolinski and Associates. Go to the website, aa-legal.com, and hey, look at there. Low right-hand corner, there's a pop-up window if you wanted to have a discussion 24/7, 365 with someone on the other end of that pop-up window. Cut him an email, Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. Get a free consultation at 404-377-9191. Recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine, being one of the top 100 trial attorneys in the state of Georgia. Apolinski and Associates, LLC, aa-legal.com.
Nicely done. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jason Wright of the Jason Wright Agency. We will hopefully have some MLS fantasy soccer talk to have in the next couple of months, and maybe we'll try to create some kind of special Orlando tournament fantasy league cup. I don't know, something. We'll come up with something.
But wait a second, wouldn't that fall under the Copa Especial guidelines
from
Josh Bailey?
That's not anything to do with Jason Wright and the Jason Wright Agency. You are mixing up situations and fantasy competitions and all of that because you probably had Mountain Lightning this morning.
You ain't kidding. No, this is where we are. So let's see. How much do we have left? We got about an inch left in the cup this morning.
Yeah, so you might need more. You're thinking Chris Ashley's, or no, sorry, not even Chris Ashley.
Josh Bailey.
Chris Ashley. They're Josh Bailey. We got all kinds of names. So I need more Mountain Lightning too. Jesus, John's broken me this morning. All right. Anyway, Jason Wright, thank you. Jason Wright Agency on Facebook. Jason Wright AGEN on Twitter. Okay. We will have MLS fantasy at some point this season because I do think we're going to have games. I think we're down that road to where they're going to find a way, but man, it's tricky. We got to give a big shout out because we've talked a lot about the Premier League being full of nonsense and the English leagues being full of nonsense figuring this out. Marcus Rashford has been providing 2.8 million children with food during the coronavirus pandemic. Marcus Rashford is pretty awesome for this contribution in Manchester. So he was given an award by the High Sheriff of Greater Manchester, recognizes the appreciation of the people of Greater Manchester for the altruistic acts of thoughtfulness and kindness during the COVID-19 pandemic. Marcus Rashford, you are a gent for doing good things and not ending up on the Twit of the Day competition.
Kyle Walker.
Thank you, Marcus
Kyle
Rashford.
Hudson
Thank you.
Odoi.
Yes.
Oh, goodness gracious. It's just no red solo cups and no commingling in multiple locations. Thank you, Marcus Rashford.
Yes, Marcus Rashford doing good things. The Times in London is reporting that the Premier League has dropped its opposition to matches that kick off at 3 p.m. on Saturdays being shown on TV if they are played behind closed doors. The rule has always been that 10 a.m. game for us here in Atlanta, that window, there's no televised matches in England during that window because that's when a lot of lower league teams play as well, and they have a blackout. Well, if you don't have people in the stands, then you need to have those games on TV, and the Premier League has come to its senses and dropped any opposition to that. So good job, Premier League, because it doesn't make sense to have a blackout of a closed-door match.
Yes.
Kind of impossible.
Mm-hmm. Did you see, speaking of the Premier League, where clubs are considering payday-style loans with huge interest rates to stop from going bust?
No, but I'm not surprised.
City investors are intent on charging as much as 25% on borrowings up to £100 million in a bid to cash in on the economic uncertainty. They claim that there are at least 4 top-flight outfits at the mercy, in quotation marks, of private equity or venture capitalist firms, which are offering loans at rates way above the Bank of England base rate of 0.1%. So revenue streams obviously have been decimated. All Premier League sides have stepped up their return to training, and you're also looking at trying to figure out a way to not pay back that £762 million that would be due broadcasters if the contracts are being breached. And so you've got a handful of clubs, my guess is either mid-table or lower, that would be looking at this as an option to stay afloat, sadly.
But this is the scary thing about it is, going down that road, you need quick money, but you're expecting money quickly. It's more of like a cash flow issue if you're going to make something like that actually work. There's no guarantee of money coming anytime soon. Like that's the part that I'm not getting with this, and I think is being left out of the conversation too much. Look, like, you can take out a loan, you can figure out, what you're going to do in the short term to deal with TV contracts or paying off the rest of your players' contracts, those kinds of things. You don't know when you're going to have fans in the stands again. In Germany, they're saying not for the rest of 2020. You're not going to have fans in the stands until 21. England, that's been talked about as well. Okay, you take one of these short-term, high-interest loans to meet whatever obligations you have now, but there's nothing coming. If you're in the Premier League and you have TV money coming, okay, I can buy it. If you're in the Championship and you have less TV money coming, but TV money coming, you must be really desperate. If you're below that, there's no point. Like, if you're to that point, there's nothing you can do because you don't have revenue coming around the corner. Yep.
The financial expert that was interviewed for the article says liquidity in football clubs is very low. Most of those looking for cash are asking for tied-over money of 30 to 50 million pounds over 6 months. And there's no rule to say the lender can't set whatever rate it likes if they know the client is desperate. That is also true.
Yeah, and they're also probably not going to do it unless they think they're going to have money coming. Which, if it's a Premier League club, you've got TV money coming down the road. So, yeah, I mean, you would have revenue coming in that way. Or these people are going to do it because then they think they're going to have a claim on whatever liquidation or whatever happens. So, it's, that's the reality. I mean, that's just the reality of where a lot of these teams are. It's scary. It's every country in the world, too. I mean, Mexico, for example. A lot of talk over the weekend about Morelia moving to Mazatlan. And there's a lot of stuff going on around this. The Sinaloa governor stated that they've had advanced negotiations with a few teams. Morelia, Puebla, Querétaro were the ones that were talked about. Morelia is the one. I mean, you've got protesters outside of Morelia's offices right now. Mazatlan is working on a 25,000-seat new stadium. I think it's government-backed, so people are saying that is that factoring into pushing Morelia out the door. It's rough, and what's really rough about it is ESPN reporter Jose Ramon Fernandez on Twitter said that when you convert the pesos to U.S. dollars, Morelia was sold to go to Mazatlan for just over $18 million. I mean, $18 million is a lot more dollars than I have, but
yeah,
for a Liga MX team, $18 million, that wouldn't get you an MLS team.
Mm-mm.
Not before the pandemic, at least, and probably not now. That's a little surprising that it's that low. Now, you do have issues with teams in a lot of debt. And I don't know if this purchase is going... I don't know Morelia's debt situation. Is this going to erase debt? Are they not going to take that debt on? Is that why they're getting it for low? Or are they getting it for low because they're taking that debt on?
Yeah.
These are the things that we just don't know all the details on. You also have a situation that was reported by Charlie Assam of the SB Nation site, FMF State of Mind. And I'm not 100% sure. It was a little confusing on if these two things are related. Sevilla in Spain is looking to buy a team like what Atletico Madrid did in buying Atletico San Luis. And they have a team in India as well. Atletico San Luis was in the second division, earned their promotion after Atletico bought it. So, okay, you bought cheap, they got promoted, you moved up. And I don't know if this is Morelia, but there's talk about teams being up to $20 million in debt in Mexico. And you also now have the fears of, in Mexico, coronavirus positive tests are jumping up in a big way. Hospitalizations are jumping up in a big way, and they have one of the lowest testing capacities in the world. So, as we've talked about with Brazil, you have a situation where Club America, huge team, they're going to be able to deal with this. You've got backing that's going to help you deal with it. Other teams, big, they'll be able to handle it. Morelia, you might not have had a way to survive this without moving to Mazatlan. Other clubs, there's going to be more. And if this gets worse and continues to get worse, it's going to have more of an effect. This is all in conjunction with a couple of different things that have come out outside of that. Remember, there was a complaint filed with CAS about suspending promotion relegation in Mexico. Well, according to Tom Marshall at ESPN, and he is giving a report from Mexican Federation President De Luisa, he told this to Marca, so it's all secondhand, but it's coming from different reporting. FIFA is asking that the pro-rel suspension in Mexico be temporary, and I think the more important part of it, everybody's looking at that highlight as ooh, shiny lights. I think the more important part is multi-ownership of teams by one person or company must end. And that's something that MLS went through and had to get, teams that Phil Anschutz, was kept alive, bought to keep them alive,
and
had
the
to sell
Hunts,
those off. The Hunts had a couple. Anschutz had like 6 of 12 at one point.
Yeah.
That was necessary at the time. In Mexico, you could say it's been necessary. You could also say maybe you have some owners who are greedy, and it creates some questions about ethics and competitive balance. FIFA saying that's got to end. I think that's going to be the harder one to deal with. The pro-rel side of it, it gets the attention, but to have the TV partners, and in which a lot of times in Mexico, the TV partners have ownership in the teams, to get some of them to sell teams off, well, who's going to buy some of these, smaller teams? That's the problem, is they're not going to sell off the big teams. They're going to sell off the small teams. Who's out there to buy them? Are we going to have more Veracruz situations where somebody gets in over their head, buys a team, but can't actually run it? You also have the president of Liga MX, Enrique Bonilla, recently saying that promotion could return by 2022-23, which would probably satisfy FIFA. And the league doesn't want to relegate anybody. They want to grow to 22 or 24 teams. The Veracruz lack of relegation this past season, the idea was to have, in the fall, that had 19 teams. I would assume that was kind of a first step to getting to 20.
Yeah.
Instead of relegating Veracruz, they took a fat check, which then Veracruz couldn't even finish the season, but they stayed at 19. That would have then given them justification to say, well, we're not going to relegate anybody, we'll promote, and we'll get to 20. They want to get to 22 or 24. They're at 18 right now. Morelia moving to Mazatlan. I mean, outside of Leones Negros, Correcaminos, I don't know if there's 4 more teams in the second division that can step up. And that was before this. During this, after this, I don't know. Mexico's going to have a lot of problems with this.
I was going to ask, I mean, because of what we know about the current state of the Ascenso and this desire of Bonilla to get to 22 or 24, and this notion that the single ownership is desired by FIFA, you have all of these things here in play, and I don't know if all of them are going to get plugged in to where you're going to have 22 or 24 that are solid, single ownership across the board. I see too many questions here about all this stuff going down.
Yeah, I don't know where the new owners are going to come from. That's the problem. Is I don't think there's a group of people sitting outside of it that are willing to pay $18 million for a team right now. I don't think there's a large number of that. And you're going to have teams that need to get sold, and you're going to have second division teams that have nowhere near enough investment to be able to move up. So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy at all. A little bit more on the Premier League, the broadcast thing, because this is all going to come up on Thursday when you start figuring out schedule. That blackout has been lifted. The Premier League has given into the pressure from the government to do that. All 92 remaining Premier League games will now be shown live on TV. The negotiations on how many will be free TV still ongoing. Broadcast schedule will be discussed on Thursday, and it has already been decided that the games will not be played simultaneously. So in Germany, for example, we have games happening at the same time. In the Premier League, they're saying they're not going to do that to maximize the TV side of it, which I get. I'll just be curious to see how it goes. I mean, I guess if you're not worrying about fans in the stands, it's not as big of an issue. Yeah. Start at noon, UK time, and if you're playing in different venues, I mean, you're noon, you're 2, you're 4, you're 6, you're 8. That's 5 games in Saturday, 5 games on Sunday. You know, I mean, it's doable. And if you have a Friday night game or a Monday game for TV, you can easily make that work.
Yeah. So, I want to see how they would like to schedule that stuff out, because just of having 10 matchups, you put 1 on Friday, 1 on Monday, and then you put your 4 on Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, I could see that going down. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that's easy to manage. Before we get into some of the other stuff going on, Australia was another one we mentioned. End of the week, end of this month, last day of May, more than 100 contracts are set to expire. And they have not figured out next steps in Australia at all. You've got the Federation trying to help broker a solution. You're running out of time. You could come back with, according to Dominic Bossi of the Sydney Morning Herald, at least 20 foreign players and coaches still overseas and not coming back, and a lot of them are out of contract at the end of May, and you're not going to pay to bring them back if you're not going to bring them back in the long term, and if you're running out of money and not going to have Fox Sports back, you're probably not going to bring them back in the long term. So what are you going to do? They will do a hub, it sounds like, more and more. The Federation's going to be part of this. But as Bossi writes, many players who lit up the first 6 months may not be there to complete the campaign, with a cast of imports having returned home abroad in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and coming off contract this Saturday. So Australia's got a lot of issues to deal with in the short term. Brazil, from Thiago Nogueira, Super.FC, they're going to push the start of their Brasileiro, their national first division, back to July right now. I'm skeptical of them getting games played in July. If they are able to do that and start in July, they can play the 38 rounds of the competition. It's 20 teams. You're playing everybody home and away, 38 games. That could even go into January of 2021. They wouldn't have to change the format. They've got the dates to make it work with all their scheduled competitions. That's if they start in July. As we're seeing, Brazil is starting to become the hub of the outbreak right now. But you also have a government that is really not paying a whole lot of attention to it. So they shouldn't play in July, probably, but they might because they might not care about anything else. Don't know. They're not canceling anything at the moment. They feel like with CONMEBOL, with FIFA, with international dates, with CONMEBOL competitions, they can make it all work and finish the 2020 Brasileiro in January of 21 and not get off track. I think they're going to get off track. I just don't see any way for this to happen. In the Netherlands, AZ complained to UEFA wanting to be declared champions instead of Ajax. They finished level on points. Ajax had a better goal differential, had more goals scored. The question that came to Edwin van der Sar, Ajax's CEO, is would Ajax, in retaliation for this, because they said they didn't know anything about AZ making this complaint, would Ajax, in retaliation, not create the Solidarity Fund that has been talked about in the Netherlands? Ajax is one of the most financially stable clubs in the Netherlands. They were going to be a big part of this. Van der Sar said, as far as we are concerned, this does not change. We are in solidarity and therefore already give money to both divisions. We just want to reserve an extra amount for the coming season. We are currently discussing this. We want to do that for the Eredivisie, but certainly also for the second division, so that we can get through these tough times as well as possible with as many clubs as possible. So that's kind of crazy. If AZ ticked off Ajax and Ajax is like, oh, well, we're not going to give money. We're going to take our money back. We have an update on what we talked about from France yesterday. You've got senators that have brought forward an amendment in the government to allow the French league to complete its season, even though the French league said they're not going to do that. You've got teams in the lower divisions that would have been part of a playoff to earn a promotion spot who are not going to be given that opportunity as things currently stand. They filed a complaint. It was denied. You've got the teams that are getting relegated from the first division that are still contesting being relegated. But our friend Jean-Michel Aulas from Lyon has taken it a step further, according to you, John?
Yeah, he has now decided that he wants to go to court and is now trying to petition that particular element of all of this. So he's written letters. He has gone to prime ministers and wanted to have things reversed. And so now he's just going to go to court over it.
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised.
No.
There's a lot of questions about the French decision-making process, as Aulas has pointed out and others have pointed out. Part of the process said by the government in not allowing games to be played was that it would not have worked with UEFA's calendar. So they could not meet UEFA's timeline, so they couldn't finish the season. And Aulas has submitted letters from UEFA saying, no, that's not the case. You know, when you start looking at a court case, well, that might tip things in Lyon's favor. A lot of people are now, because Germany's come back, and remember, the French president reportedly lobbied the Bundesliga not to come back. That was reported in Germany around the time of their return. Why, I have no idea. But Germany has come back and handled it. Spain is making progress in coming back. They're planning on starting June 11. Premier League looks like June 26 now is going to be the restart, but they're all making moves to come back. France is the one who said no, and we said they were the biggest league that has said they're not coming back. Now you're starting to get questions like, did they make the decision too soon? And according to Aulas, did they make the decision with faulty information? That part, I think, is true. But does it change the decision that would have been made? We don't know yet. France is going to continue to pick up here. It's going to get trickier and trickier. In England, the only other thing I had on the board was you're getting into some weird situations with loans as well, because loans typically are going to end June 30th, and if the Premier League doesn't start until June 26th, well, you've got some decisions to make. According to Mike McGrath at The Telegraph, Sheffield United goalkeeper Dean Henderson, he's on loan from Manchester United. Manchester United is going to allow that loan to continue through the rest of the season, and honestly, they might be better off not doing that, because competing for European spots, Manchester United and Sheffield United. And Manchester United could say, the loan is up June 30th, and we want him back. But it sounds like they're going to allow him to finish out the season with Sheffield United. Now, they play each other, and part of the loan is he won't play in that match. That was already there. But they're going to let him finish the season out with Sheffield United. It's the right move ethically. I mean, I think it's the right thing to do, but man, from a competitive standpoint, I don't know. That's risky.
Well, and you also mentioned transfers quickly. Odion Igalo's stay at Manchester United is likely to end next week. Shanghai Shenhua has refused to extend his loan, and the loan at Old Trafford expires at the end of the month.
Yeah, expires. I would assume
end of this month.
Okay, I don't know why it expired. Probably because
31 May.
Okay, they probably just thought the league would have been over by now, which it should have been, but it's not. So, okay, then he's going to go back because they don't have to extend it, and that's where you're at. In Germany, this was a pretty interesting story that I had not heard until I saw it in Soccer America this morning. So, midfielder Dmitry Nazarov, he scored the winner in the second division. Oh, man, I am not up on my German. Esgeberge Aue. And I know that's awful. They won 1-0 over Nuremberg. I mean, it's in the ballpark, but they won 1-0 at Nuremberg. Nazarov got in a little bit of trouble. He hugged his coach after scoring the goal. Thomas Romecki. Well, the reason he did is Romecki doubles as the team's bus driver. On the way to Nuremberg, he managed to guide the bus to safety when it was hit by flying vehicle parts from an accident on the freeway. And Nazarov said, "I hope that the DFL will turn a blind eye. I know that none of this is allowed, and I hope that they show some humanity. He just saved our lives. Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't reacted so quickly." That's why the goal celebrations went to him. Give him the benefit of the doubt here, DFL, please.
Yes, yeah.
He hugged the coach who was driving the bus and dodged flying vehicle parts.
Uh-huh.
He can get a hug.
Yeah, I think so.
They're all being tested. He can get a hug. Today, big game. Der Klassiker. It is Borussia Dortmund. It is Bayern Munich. It's 12:30 on FS1. Two of the leading scorers in Europe, Robert Lewandowski, Erling Haaland, both have 35 games played this season, 41 goals. It's absurd. Lewandowski scoring every 74 minutes. Haaland is scoring every 70 minutes for Dortmund since joining them. He was scoring every 52 minutes for Red Bull Salzburg. So, firepower up front for both of them. It's 4-point lead for Bayern Munich at the top of the table with 7 games left, I believe. Maybe 6. And if that means it's getting tight. Dortmund's looked really good since coming back. So they absolutely have a shot here. They don't have to win. I think they're still alive if they draw. If they lose, it's done. If they lose, it's not mathematically done, but it's done. There's no way they're coming back from 7 points down with 6-7 games left. If it's 4 points with 6-7, okay. If it's 1 point, then, yeah, we got a title race. So a lot of people on the neutral side probably cheering for Borussia Dortmund today. Bayern Munich fans are hoping to almost seal the deal today. One other thing from our friend Bernd Dursberger as well. We talked about it last night. Fox actually announced that the ratings for their second week of Bundesliga matches behind closed doors, it only declined 8%. There was a thought that it would be higher. We thought it'd be higher. It was actually a pretty good retention rate. That's a credit to the presentation. I think, again, it was better in the second week because people knew a little bit more. I think they handled the halftime breaks a little bit better. They're still not producing wraparound coverage, which I get. They don't have the property after this year. They're not going to spend the money on something that's going away. And if they're getting better ratings than they ever got for it, than in the past, and now they're not doing any of the wraparound coverage, well, it's cheaper to get the better ratings and probably a little more advertising money, and cool. In Germany as well, there were some other votes with other leagues in the country. The third division is going to resume play. They've created a task force to work towards maintaining the economic stability of their clubs. The Frauen-Bundesliga, the women's league, the first division is going to come back. And outside of the NWSL, they're the only first division women's league that is talking about coming back. They are set to resume May 29th. Second division in the Frauen-Bundesliga not coming back. Again, it's financials. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So that's where we stand. We talked a lot last night about the NWSL and reports from The Athletic, Meg Linehan and Pablo Maurer, and Yahoo Sports, Caitlin Murray, about the situation for the NWSL to come back and play in Utah. It's sounding like the U.S. women's national team players as a group are talking about not participating. And they have their guaranteed salaries from the federation and from the league, regardless of if a season happens in the NWSL or not. They're in a different situation than your NWSL players who are not national team players, who some probably have financial incentive to come back and play, potentially improving their situation, whether it's to earn Vlatko Andonovski's attention for a potential Olympic team berth next year, whether it's to earn a contract going to Europe. Lots of different possibilities there. So there's talk, and things are very far down the road about the NWSL playing a tournament over a little over a month's time, late June to late July in Utah, but not having U.S. women's national team players because they have not signed off on the plan as of yet. It is a complicated negotiation with that.
I have a couple of things on my sheet. Germany, Italy, the championship, and also breaking news out of New Jersey. Where would you like to go first?
Oh, we have breaking news out of New Jersey. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So... From Governor Phil Murphy at GovMurphy on Twitter. Update. Professional sports teams in New Jersey may return to training and even competition if their leagues choose to move in that direction. We've been in constant discussions with teams about necessary protocols to protect the health and safety of players, coaches, and personnel. That is his tweet of about 15 minutes ago.
Okay. We had the Red Bulls train yesterday, so I guess the development is that return to competition. Mm-hmm. They would allow, I'm going to assume, games behind closed doors, not games with fans in the stands, unless New Jersey has really had an about face.
Yeah. Jeff Kassouf says it means that Sky Blue, which is owned by Governor Phil Murphy, can commence NWSL Phase 2 small group training locally rather than having to go elsewhere.
Okay, that helps. We're also getting reports out of, on the youth side, we'll give it a different one. And that'll wake you up, too, if you didn't have the mountain lightning. The ECNL return to training guidelines require a minimum of 6 weeks from the start of small group training to the return of local competition, assuming that a club's local guidelines accommodate that. So 6 weeks from small group to local competition. In the NWSL, I know the reporting was about a 5-day small group to full team training, which is not the same thing. It would be more like 4 weeks from small group to competition. The Bundesliga I don't remember the small group to competition. I know from contact training to competition, it was about a week and a half, which was aggressive. The Premier League is pushing back. They want at least 3 weeks of full team training. And when we say full team training, that's got to assume contact as well. It's a normal training session. 3 weeks there. The MLS has talked about 2 in previous reporting from The Athletic of full team training. ECNL, this guideline, I don't have the full guidelines. It's not full team training 6 weeks, but the small group 2 games is 6 weeks in total. You're starting to get some states that are looking at a return to at least some activity on the youth sports. And this is, all the way across the board. I think Georgia High School is allowing individual training as soon as June 1st. Is that right?
June 1st, you are allowed to go into group settings, and it is basically lift, run, and go home. They consulted with Ron Corson at the University of Georgia, and that starts June 8th. They thought about June 1st, but they pushed it back to June 8th just to give, with the holiday week and the larger schools, the opportunity and the larger school systems to come up with guidelines. So it pushed to June 8th. Basically, if you have a group can only be 20 in a weight room, but that has to include coaches and supervisors. So if you have 2 supervisors, that means 18 athletes. And it is vigilance when it comes to wiping down everything. It is, if you and I are in the weight room, say, you do your set, you wipe everything down, I do my set, wipe everything down again. And there's also a mandatory 15 minutes in between sessions so the entire weight room facility can be sanitized before the next group can come in. If you're in the 8 o'clock group, say, for the entire time, that's your group. You can't be in the 8 o'clock group one day and the 2 o'clock group the next day. That way they've got that stuff. But June 8th for Georgia High School. And
you're doing the consistency with the groups is for contact tracing.
Yes.
That has to be understood.
Yes.
Because if people jump from group to group and then there is a positive test and an outbreak, you can't really identify it and isolate it as easily. That needs to be understood. All that sounds great. I would imagine there's some small high schools who don't have the means to really do that effectively. And I worry that this is a idea on paper that's not actually practical. We'll see. You're getting youth sports trying to find a way back. You're getting high school sports now. Colleges are trying to figure it out. It's an interesting time as we navigate all of this. The one thing that keeps jumping out to me, the more we're hearing, college football talk about things, NFL talk about things, high school football talk about things, youth sports talk about things, there is no consistency. There is zero consistency in the messaging, in the protocols that are being presented publicly. I hope there are in the actual protocols that are being organized privately. That's concerning to me because it feels like it's all over the place. And with that lack of consistency, I worry about the effectiveness. And I worry that the wrong things are determining these protocols and returns to play. I mean, for example, high school football and basketball athletes are allowed to do that. Nobody else, right?
All sports. It is
all sports. Okay.
All in Georgia. Sorry. In Georgia, I don't know about other states.
That's fine.
Yeah.
In college, it was just football and basketball. They weren't allowing other sports to come back yet, which is why. If you're allowing all sports to come back, but it is only, and this is at high school, only weight room conditioning? They can run on the track?
I don't know specifically. All I heard was conditioning, so I imagine let's assume conditioning is track. There is no contact, no 7-on-7 if you're talking football.
Well, the most important thing, there's no ball. No. So you can't, if you are a quarterback, you can't go throw. If you are a pitcher, and that would be for the spring, but you didn't have a season, and if they're going to allow everybody to come back, maybe you come back too and start throwing. You can't throw a ball. Nope. There's some things in it that it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. MLS is allowing soccer players to do work with a ball.
Yep.
But here you're not. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's these inconsistencies across things where it's like, are we looking at one another? Are we trying to learn from one another? Are we learning from best practices? Or are we just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks? That's what it feels like at times. And that ain't going to work. Just look, let's be real. That's not going to work. You're going to have problems because none of that protocol at the high school level, and I would assume because the high schools can't afford this from an athletic department perspective, none of that includes testing.
Yeah.
Are you going to have tests to go back to school? Well, we don't know. All of this stuff, whenever you are having, and this is the part of the conversation that has frustrated me with some of the arguing against it. At the Bundesliga, for example, you're testing twice a week. I'm not testing twice a week. You're not testing twice a week. Your average person is not testing twice a week. There are some jobs that are probably requiring testing twice a week. Why? You're in tight spaces. You're not able to do the job and socially distance. You might be jobs where you can't wear a mask at all times. There are things that mitigate your ability to avoid other people and spreading it. So the only way to be safe is to test. Test, isolate, contact trace, recover, return when safe. Those are the elements that go into it. None of that works. You can have all the protocols about wiping things down and all this stuff, but if you're not doing testing, can you safely return to these things? That's the part where I have a disconnect. And that's not the same thing as you or I going to the store or whatever, because look, we can manage that. Going to the store should not be a full contact experience. Sometimes it is. It shouldn't be. We should be able to avoid people. If you are an offensive lineman, forget it. If you are a center back, forget it. If you're a point guard, forget it. There's things that you cannot avoid people with. So you have to do the testing to support it. When these protocols are like the high school one, like some of the college ones, even like some of the professional sports here, I think MLS is heavily informed by what's going on in the Bundesliga. You'd be silly not to. Whereas the NFL might say, well, it's a soccer league, there's certain things we're going to learn from that, but we can't do everything like they do. Well, maybe you should because it's working. Mm-hmm. College football. Well, no, we're not going to spend that money. Well, you're going to end up losing more money if you don't do this right. There's lots of elements to it that the return to play protocol criteria here, it is all over the map, and that's scary to me. And I hope that we can start to develop a little more consistency. And if we don't, look, it's going to be down to the leagues and the governing bodies and the people that are in positions of power in those organizations that are going to bear the brunt of it. Luckily, I feel like MLS and their protocol planning, I don't think the issues with Orlando are about the protocols, the testing, those elements of things. It's about the cost from a pay cut perspective. It is about the being away from the family for that period of time, and it's about how restrictive is the environment going to be in Orlando. It's not about the actual safety procedures. I think that part, look, you've got a track record now with what the Bundesliga is doing. Do that. Other leagues, I don't know. I don't know. This part's not being talked about much here, I don't think. I think we're all focusing on the headlines of, players don't want to take a pay cut. Understand it. Leagues not really talking about how much money they're potentially losing, or teams, but that's a big story that needs to be talked about as well. Return to play, not wanting restrictions, but safety and the actual protocols Maybe it's just because we've been so engrossed in it with what's going on in Europe, because it's been such a part of the return to play there, that we're maybe a little more sensitive to it here. It's not being talked about very much. And, the SEC one, when they immediately said they weren't testing, and unless people show symptoms, that was red flags, red flag, red flag everywhere for me.
Yep.
These high school things, there's huge red flags for me. There's huge concern with this because it just doesn't feel like it's completely thought out. And now you have some best practices that you can work from. And that's what's maybe a little frustrating, is that Germany had to do a lot of this from scratch. Well, now you've got 2 weeks of no outbreak, games, the travel that goes along with it. You played behind closed doors, but you've been able to make it work. Why aren't we learning more from that? I don't know.
For me, I will continue to go back to the notion that the Bundesliga was talking to the government from the beginning. You had constant conversation. You had back and forth. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? You had questions and answers and back and forth and all of this stuff. I think that for me, it underscores the importance of preparation and having an idea from the beginning of a problem as opposed to the midpoint of the bell curve or further down the line. And I think that what you're seeing, once again, it's reaction to something as opposed to being proactive and trying to figure out, okay, what solutions can we work on, and know that those solutions may not be the same next week as they are right now, but at least we're working on something from the absolute beginning instead of going far too down the road where in some cases it might be too late that you've started something. Whereas you look at the Bundesliga, and I've heard nothing about any kind of positive tests in the last week and a half, ever since matches came back online. And it's fantastic to see what they're doing, and you just want to go to the nearest tallest building, mountaintop, whatever, and scream and point at that and go, be like that!
Yeah. The NWSL plan, according to Pablo Maurer and Meg Linehan at The Athletic, players and staff members would take the infection test and a serology test, which is for the antibodies, prior to preseason officially starting. Now, teams who are doing individual training, I don't know if they've done that yet. It does look like some players have been tested. That's according to the Athletic article, but I don't know if there's a policy there yet. So you're taking test and antibody test. Players would take a second test 24 hours later. Okay, so you're dealing with the false positive concern. Players would then take further tests on a weekly basis throughout preseason, and that's in market, and then the same test upon their arrival in Utah. So weekly testing. Players would also be tested prior to each match, so I'm assuming that you would ramp up once you're going to matches, and you would have that in addition to your weekly test. Okay, that's standard. Referees, broadcast partners, other staff, everybody who would be on site would be subjected to the same routine. So the NWSL, the MLS plans in that regard feel pretty well thought out, feel pretty consistent with what we've seen has worked. It's not, 100%. I mean, we've seen in England as teams have ramped back up, you had 6 the first week, you had 2 the second. Okay, one's talking about maybe going to a market. Maybe that's where he got it. All right, going to a shop. Okay, we're learning, but we're identifying it and moving forward. Spain, we haven't heard of a whole bunch of new tests afterwards. It seems like the leagues that have policies are able to identify, isolate, deal with, move forward, not have widespread infection. That seems to be the blueprint. And luckily, the 2 major leagues here are working in that direction. Haven't heard USL Championship yet because I don't know how close they are to having a protocol to return to play. They've got teams training in USL Championship, USL League One, but we don't know about returning to play yet. That's where you're getting to this level of protocol. Premier League, we will see if the protocol for return to contact training gets approved today. We have not heard anything as of yet, and it's about 4 o'clock, 4:06 in England right now. I would assume we'll start to hear some things, so we'll share those out when we see them. We will also be getting ready for Bundesliga. 12:30 today. I think it's a doubleheader. There's a game at 12:30 on FS1, Dortmund and Bayern. There is a game on FS2. If you have Fox Soccer Plus, I think you can access the third game. Or it could be on Deportes or Today NA as well. So 12:30 and 2:30, you got 3 games in 2 slots in the Bundesliga today. You got more games tomorrow. I'm sure we'll be talking about Der Klassiker tomorrow because it's the most compelling game since we've had the return to action, and it should be a really entertaining one. Dortmund has looked so good since coming back. Bayern's looked good. Not as good as Dortmund, though, and we'll see if Dortmund can get the big win this afternoon. We'll keep you posted on everything as it develops, and we'll share things out from our Soccer Down Here Twitter account. As you guys see things, as you guys have questions, you want us to dig into things a little deeper, please send them our way on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. You can send us an email, soccerdownhere@gmail.com. You can send us a message on Facebook as well. You can join us on Twitch and hang out with us there during the live show and chime in. I'm looking forward to some fun soccer today, and hopefully we don't have any other nonsense around that. I want to enjoy a big game and not be worried about the Premier League lighting itself on fire or anybody else doing that in the soccer world.
Bayern Munich -119 against Dortmund. Bayer Leverkusen -133 against Wolfsburg. Eintracht Frankfurt at +104 going up against Freiburg at 2:30. Werder Bremen, Borussia Mönchengladbach. Borussia Mönchengladbach is -130, courtesy of our friends at Odds Portal.
We will see where it goes. You can also check out Prize Picks as well for their options on it. Use the code SDH. You'll get 25% of your initial deposit matched up to $1,000. You might feel lucky. It's still so hard for me to read it. I'm waiting a little bit longer because home field is pretty much non-existent. It's tough. I do think there's going to be goals in Dortmund and Bayern. So if I was looking at the goal scorers in that game, I'd probably be looking at Haaland and Lewandowski. And if I'm looking at the over, I'm going to feel pretty good about that. So we'll talk about it tomorrow, and we will get caught up with you guys in the morning, 9 a.m. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.